Hey guys, it's Madison Estes. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about The End of You, the Netflix show starring everyone's favorite stalker, Joe Goldberg. For those of you unfamiliar with the show, it's basically about a yandere who goes around murdering anyone that comes between him and the object of his affection. Season 4 left us on quite a cliffhanger. Joe attempts suicide, he survives, the woman that he's in love with, Kate, stays by him and tells him that even though she knows that he's killed people, they can both make a fresh start. As long as they accept each other's flaws and the number of people that they've both killed, then they'll be able to move forward and be good people. Even though there's lots of clues at the end of season 4 that hint that this is not going to be possible and that Joe might actually become worse than ever before. Season 5 starts off 3 years later. I was not expecting them to do a time jump, but I think that they made good use of it. They used that time jump to have Kate and Joe fight for custody of Henry and get it. They also had Joe come forward and do some interviews to kind of explain why he killed Love Quinn in self-defense and that he's really a good guy. Joe and Kate also do a lot of charity work, which mostly just means attending galas and throwing lots of her dad's company's money at different charities. This is Kate's interpretation of them making amends for the things that they did, is basically them just attending a bunch of parties, giving away a bunch of her dad's company's money to charities. And that does not go over too well with her family members that think that she's kind of getting a little bit ridiculous with pledging all of this money and not even getting approval before she does it. That's whenever the problems start, because Uncle Bob and one of her sisters start colluding together to plot against Kate. They basically threaten to expose her involvement in the pipeline that her dad had built that poisoned thousands of people. Hundreds of children were killed, according to Kate, and she helped her dad cover it up. And this is sort of the thing that she's most ashamed of in her entire life, and it's the secret that she will do anything to try to protect. So she asks Joe in the first episode if he will take care of Uncle Bob in the way that he used to take care of other problems. Basically, she brings the old Joe Goldberg back. So Kate also spends the next 2 to 3 episodes being insufferable and basically saying that they made a huge mistake in killing Bob and being really hypocritical and saying that's not who we are anymore and all this other stuff. And it's like, no, it is very much who you are. I almost feel like she blames Joe for her decision to send Joe to go kill him, because she kind of makes it sound like, well, if you hadn't been there, the devil on my shoulder, trying to convince me to do this, we wouldn't have done this. We should have never done this. It's very nauseatingly infuriating. I'll go into a little bit more on that later, but we also have a subplot where somebody breaks into the old bookstore Joe used to work at that he now owns, and this happens a couple times, and rather than calling the police or handling it the Joe way, he becomes enamored by her because she is a quirky literary girl and she throws some literary references at him, and now suddenly he's got a crush. So Joe offers her a job because that's not tempting fate, and as he slowly becomes more attached to Bronte, his marriage starts falling apart. That's basically what happens for the first 5 episodes of the season, and then things start to take a little bit of a turn as they throw quite a curveball twist in the middle of the season. Unfortunately, I knew what that twist was because I picked up on a few context clues that I think we were supposed to pick up on, but also I read a lot of fan theories. And some of the fan theories for the show actually came true, and they were actually pretty well executed. A lot of times with fan theories, either the writers will go in the opposite direction and be like, we can't do anything that even resembles the fan theories because we don't want to be predictable. But they executed it so well that I don't think anybody would be upset about that, because it's a well done twist, and a well done twist is just satisfying no matter whether or not you saw it coming. So before I get into spoilers, because I feel like you have to kind of get into spoilers if you're going to talk about the end of a show, there's a couple more things I wanted to add. I felt like season 4 was a bit slow, and it's still my least favorite season out of all of them. This one was definitely a step up. I definitely don't think it was as good as season 3, which was basically Love versus Joe and this very intense cat and mouse showdown between them. But I feel like this was pretty decent. It was a decent season overall. Lots of twists, lots of crazy things happening. There was a lot of insufferable characters, but I feel like it was a little bit better than last season, where they were truly obnoxious in every single way, where there's an eat the rich killer and you're kind of rooting for them because all the other characters are just so annoying. Although I do think the end of the season started to get back into that characters that are so obnoxious particularly when it comes to a few characters that were just way too self-righteous. But see, the thing about this show has always been that Joe kills the annoying characters, either for self-preservation, either because they get in the way. Usually they also have some kind of bad, awful secret that makes us sort of root for Joe. Not always. Sometimes they're just annoying. But that's kind of like the thing you have to look forward to with this show. It's kind of wish fulfillment, because deep down, part of us sometimes kind of wish that we could kill these people because they're so obnoxious and we have to live with them in this world. But so it's not something we would actually do. It's just kind of like dark wish fulfillment. Some of the characters ended up living, unfortunately. So yeah, I guess that was kind of a bummer. But since it is the last season, it's kind of expected, I suppose. The only other thing I want to say before I start getting into spoilers, and this is kind of a spoiler, but it's an anti-spoiler, it's something that wasn't in the season that I wish it was, is that there's a lot of characters they didn't bring back. They brought back Beck quite a bit, which I really appreciate. I thought that her flashbacks were interesting. I liked the ways that they kind of connected her and Joe in this season, and like the flashback scenes, all that was satisfying. But I didn't love that they didn't bring back Love other than like one quick flashback. And I think that would have been the perfect time to bring her back, would be when Joe's talking about wanting unconditional love. They could have had some flashbacks or filmed some new flashbacks with Love to make him like regret killing her. I don't know. I just loved her character. I wanted her back somehow. But I think that would have been really good. I would have been nice to see Joe like regret killing one of them and thinking that maybe there could have been another way. I just wanted more of the characters to come back that were big characters. Like in a very small cameo role, they brought back Ethan, they brought back Love's mom, they brought back all these Paco, they brought back all these side characters that were important for their season, but I kind of felt like that was their attempt to be like, okay, this is really the final season. We're bringing in all these small characters, as a lot of shows do when it's the last season. And I just felt like even though they brought back all these smaller characters, they didn't bring back the big ones, other than the ones that were in the last season. And Beck, okay. I think Love was like the one that was a really big one that was missing. Would have been interesting to bring back 40, and then right when I get to spoilers, I'm going to talk about how I would have brought them back. But that was just a little disappointing. Was that when they started bringing back Ethan and all these other small characters, I was like, oh, they're going to bring back everyone at some point, and then they didn't do that, so that was kind of a bummer. I feel like I'm dragging the show so hard. There was a lot of good things about this season, the biggest one being plot twists. I didn't care for the plot twists last season. They were just plot twists we've seen in other movies, but it felt like they were just recycled for this season, for season 4, because they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know how to have a plot twist because they were just out of ideas. That's what it felt like to me. And I also didn't like the direction they went with Joe's character in season 4. But with this season, we kind of got a reset, which was interesting because they kind of made it sound like, oh, Joe's worse than ever before at the end of season 4. And then season 5, he's actually been 3 years without killing anyone, and he's kind of the same as he's always been. Except he's holding it in for Kate until she unleashes him. This season, though, the plot twists were much better. They felt organic to the story. They felt very believable. There wasn't anything that was really weird, like, oh, we think we know what's going on, but Joe's actually just crazy and we're seeing hallucinations and something totally different's happening. I don't care for those kinds of twists, at least not in this show. But I felt like all of the ones in season 5 were very satisfying, and I binged the first 8 episodes with my dad in one night. It was that addicting. Almost every episode ended, if not on a cliffhanger, at least in a way that makes you really eager to see what's going to happen next. It's a very bingeable season. Now I'm going to get into spoilers. If you haven't seen the last season of You, I would definitely go watch it before you watch the rest of this video. If you don't, Joe Goldberg's going to follow you around with his invisible baseball hat and things are going to happen to you. So I'm going to start by talking about the second to last episode, which I honestly thought at the time I was watching it, I was like, this is the second to last. Like, I actually had to check it because I was like, this seems like a final episode. Joe is in a glass box, which is kind of how I always thought his character was going to die, or, you know, how his either imprisoned in the glass box or dead is kind of how I envisioned his character. And then he's got, you know, all these people that he's wronged, Nadia, Kate, and all these other people, Marianne, that are basically trying to get him to confess to what he's done, and then they're going to kill him. Somehow he escapes because he's Joe. Oh, the twist with the key in his arm was some Saw shit right there, which I absolutely loved. It's absolutely insane and ridiculous, and yet he has been locked in that box enough times that I absolutely understand why whenever things were starting to get more heated and that chance of him getting kidnapped was always there, I understand why he did it. So it's one of those bonkers ass twists that is actually kind of makes sense. Alright, so now for like the last part of that episode. I loved Kate's death. I was so fucking pissed whenever they retconned it and were like, Kate's actually alive. We're not gonna explain how she got out of there. Like, Bronte barely escaped with Joe. How did Kate get out of there? She was bleeding to death. She was unconscious. Bronte even had trouble getting Joe out, even though Joe was not unconscious. He wasn't dead weight. He was actually helping her by moving, he needed some help, but he was able to support himself. Who went in there and got Kate? It made no sense at all. And like, yeah, she was in the basement, but there's no way. And not just that, but I felt like Kate's death was satisfying in a way that so few TV deaths are. Like, not only was she a character that really needed to redeem herself somehow, and despite having ample opportunities, she doesn't seem to understand what that actually means. Like, at the beginning, whenever she's trying to redeem herself for all the children she killed and trying to live a happy life despite that, with Joe, her idea of redeeming herself is just throwing her dad's money at the problem. I'm like, so she's the same character she's always been. She just has slightly better intentions, but her solution is just, oh, I'll give this charity some money and then, I'm living a good life and doing good things. She doesn't actually start realizing the error of her ways and separating herself from Joe until she finds out he's having sex with another woman. It's not that, they killed Bob and she's afraid he's going to kill someone else. It's not that he's doing anything dangerous or anything that could come back to her and Henry. No, it's the fact that he's having sex with someone else. And that makes me really, even though I was glad that she turned against Joe and was, starting to try to get him away from Henry and separate herself from him, the fact that it took an affair and that's what finally woke her up really made it hard for me to respect her character. In addition to the fact that her idea of redeeming her and Joe was to just throw money at people. Like, she wasn't like volunteering with kids. She wasn't like actually sacrificing her time. She was just throwing money at it, and since she's already rich, that's like nothing. Her brother brings up a really good point, is that even whenever she decides to turn against Joe, she spends several episodes doing nothing but protecting herself and Henry, despite the fact that there's more characters that are being put in harm's way because of her inaction. So even though she claims to be on this redemption arc, she's not actually doing anything but protecting her and her son, despite the fact that other people are being put in harm's way while she's doing that, and she's kind of complicit in that. They finally gave Kate this awesome moment of redemption where she underestimates Joe, so she goes down into the pit. She doesn't think that he has a key in his arm because she hasn't seen the Saw movies. So she goes down there completely unprepared for what she encounters. Joe attacks her, knocks her out. She's lying there bleeding, although she got him good too as well. While they're both sitting there in the basement waiting for the fire to kill them, she kind of nonchalantly congratulates him for the key in his arm and kind of laughs at it, which was probably my favorite Kate moment of the entire show, is her like laughing at Joe having the key in his arm and being like, well done, basically. I don't remember exactly what she says, but that was the impression I got. She's like, well done, you got me. She tricks him into confessing to killing Love Quinn unprovoked. To me, it feels like the emotional weight of that scene is deeply lessened if neither of them die in it. And so kind of they retroactively made that scene not as good by having her live. I just feel like that scene was how she earned her redemption and her living. It's like, okay, she has a crispy arm. I don't feel like having a crispy arm for the rest of your life is truly redemption for murdering hundreds of kids. Anyways, so now moving on to the last episode. The last episode was pretty good. We start off with Bronte and Joe on the run. They're at this lake house. Bronte is trying to pretend that she's still in love with Joe because she wants him to confess to Beck's murder. When we get to the part where she is about to have sex with Joe and then she pulls the gun on him, there was a part of me that's like, why did you have to wait until you were about to have sex with him to pull the gun on him? In real life, that's actually way more dangerous than if she just walked in the room from, with the gun when he wasn't expecting it. It's fine. It's a small nitpick, but I was just like, was it for drama? Like, why did they have to wait until he's about to go down on her before she pulls a gun on him? I didn't get that. She confronts him about Beck, And then his son Henry calls, and that was probably my favorite part of the finale, was Henry calling, Joe begging Bronte to let him speak to his son because his son thinks that he abandoned him and he doesn't understand what's happening. Bronte saying yes, and then the conversation that followed, like all of it was good. Like I respected Bronte for allowing Joe to talk to his son. I really liked Will helping out. I really liked Will as a character, so I enjoyed the fact that they brought him back for the last episode to help Joe out. And the whole conversation between Joe and his son was heartbreaking. I thought that was a fantastic part of the finale. Basically his son telling him, I know you're a monster, don't ever speak to me again, basically, and cutting ties with Joe. All of that was fantastic. But soon after that, it kind of turns into a cat and mouse where Joe goes after Bronte. She's running for her life in the woods. We all kind of knew that was going to happen. She calls the cops. Joe tries to drown her. It looks like he does drown her. Like she dies on camera and then they just retcon it. In real life, people do not usually fake being drowned. They don't have mental capacity to do that because they're just on instinct. Like the instinct for air is one of the strongest instincts we have. When someone is holding your head underwater, you're not thinking rationally enough to be like, okay, just play dead. Just relax and make them think you're drowning. Like, no, the instinct is to fight until you can get oxygen. It was just a little ridiculous to basically show her dead on screen and then be like, actually, she survived somehow. We're not going to show you how. We're not going to, show maybe a cop could have found her, because the cop showed up right when he did that and performed CPR and saved her. There's ways they could have done it, but I would have preferred if she'd been a hallucination. I think the best way to end the scene would have been to have Bronte come back as a hallucination. That would have been the best thing, because he just killed her, so she was like the freshest kill on his mind. The police are closing in. It makes sense that Joe would be thinking about Bronte and all the people he's killed and all the, obviously he's thinking of escape too, but like subconsciously he could be thinking about all the people he killed to get to this point where the cops are hot on his trail. And Bronte would obviously be the first one he thinks of. So I honestly thought she was a hallucination when she showed back up. And I was so disappointed that she was real. I think that it should have been Bronte, and then he could have looked to the side and saw Love, and then he looks again and he sees somebody else that he killed or that was killed because of him, like Delilah, or they could have showed Beck. And then I would have loved if the woods had just completely filled with all of his victims, like all the people that died because of him or that he directly killed. I think that would have been an awesome, I wouldn't say final shot, because you still want to see Joe go to prison, but one of the last shots of the series could have been Joe in the woods being haunted by all the people he killed. I think it also could have been fun to switch to a cop's POV and we see Joe in the woods just trying to escape, but he's being blocked by all these people, and then it switches to a random cop's POV and they just see Joe just in the woods like this, just thrashing about like a crazy person. I think that could have been really fun to show that Joe himself is the reason that he got caught because of his own kind of repressed guilt. If not guilt, at least his demons. His demons are keeping him trapped there until the police can get a hold of him. I think that would have been more satisfying than Bronte, who is kind of a random character that was just thrown in the last season. Other than losing her mentor/friend, she didn't really lose a whole lot, so her kind of getting the satisfaction of being the one that kind of, shoots him and is the reason he gets caught, it didn't feel earned to me. But I feel like Joe himself and all of his demons and all of the victims kind of, or the ghosts or the hallucinations, depending on your interpretation, sort of trapping him there, would have felt more satisfying. Okay, lastly, the show ends with Joe going to prison. Obviously, either he's going to die or go to prison. And I kind of thought prison would be more satisfying, although there is a part of me that thinks, okay, they could continue this another season. They could have him fall in love with a prison warden, or maybe the psychiatrist that comes in to evaluate him, kind of do a Joker Harley Quinn situation, but maybe reverse it where the patient's obsessed with the psychiatrist. I think that would have been that could be kind of fun. They could still do it. And they could also have Joe get transferred to a mixed gender prison and fall in love with someone there. Or they could make Joe gay in the last season if they wanted to continue it. Personally, I like how it ended. I like that the show was over. I don't think we need another season, but I'm just throwing it out there. I do kind of think it could be funny to see Joe in prison and thinking that he's, finally going to stop obsessing and looking for his soulmate, and then the first woman he sees, he's like, "You're my soulmate." So the very last scene of him being in prison, And I want to say I really enjoyed that he was by himself in a cell. Like, he's alone now. He doesn't get to have any partner because of how destructive he's been, because of all the people he's hurt. He doesn't get that. He has to be alone, which is one of his biggest fears, I think, because of his abandonment issues. So that's like a very fitting punishment for that character. And that is the worst punishment for him. And that is what's super satisfying about it. Because even though we kind of love him, it is kind of what he deserved. The way I would have ended the show, like the very last scene, would have been Joe talking to himself and referring to himself as you, either because he's lost it from being alone so long or because he's doing self-reflection. And then he could have like looked in the mirror and been like, now all I have is you. It's a little on the nose, but what they did was also on the nose. And I forgot to mention, the season starts off with Joe, because Joe always narrates, right? And he's always talking in second person to an invisible you, and sometimes that you refers to his son, sometimes it refers to the object of his affection. In this case, he was talking to himself the first couple episodes. Like, he was saying, you know, you always screw things up, you always do this. And I thought that was really interesting. And so that's kind of how I would have ended it, with him talking to himself and reflecting in some way on his mistakes, basically saying, you did this to yourself. So yeah, so I think to embrace the concept of now Joe is alone and that is the worst punishment for him, I think ending the show with him saying, now all I have is you, when talking about himself, would have been so good. Instead, they decided to talk about Joe getting fan letters and, you know, his obsessed fans either being in denial about what he did or not caring and being obsessed with him. And that part is kind of interesting. So I don't hate it necessarily, but I did feel like whenever he's talking, I think the very last line of the show is, maybe the problem is you. And then he like looks at the camera and it's clearly talking to the audience, like, oh, there's something wrong with us for liking the show. That's kind of what it felt like the writers were saying, was maybe there's something wrong with you for liking Joe Goldberg. That was the vibe. My dad and I both kind of looked at each other and we were like, okay, I like that he's in jail, but I feel weird about that last part. That's not like a great way to end a show, in my opinion, by kind of insulting your target audience. How dare you like this character? If you still like him after all of this, there's something wrong with you. It was a little more on the nose than I would have wanted, and I feel like if they wanted to address the concept of obsessive fans, then they maybe should have introduced it a little sooner. And also not having the character talk directly to the camera and like making eye contact with the camera. Like, I felt very judged at the end of this show, and I just didn't think that that was cool. So that is about all I have to say. I know I complained so hard about the last two episodes. They were still good. Like, this is pretty much how I expected the show to end, and yet it still threw several curveballs at me, and up until the very last scene, I still wasn't entirely sure how it was gonna end. So what more can you ask for? Especially in a show like this, where I feel like, well, how is Joe gonna get out of it this time, is sort of the hook that pulls you through the series. Sure, there's times where you're rooting for Joe to like finally stop being crazy and to just be in a stable relationship and have his happy ending. And there's maybe other times we are rooting for him to get arrested, but only after he's killed all of the obnoxious characters that you can't stand. So despite all of my complaints, I actually felt like this was a really fitting end for the character. So overall, I give the last season of You 4 out of 5 stars. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and be sure to subscribe. On this channel, I post reviews, writing advice, horror commentary, and vlogs. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you later.